Hi, it's David Riley here. Thank you very much for tuning in to People and Politics. If you've not already done so, please subscribe to the show. I'd be very grateful indeed. Similarly, I'm very grateful to today's guest, Professor Peter Hack. Peter is Professor of Law and Criminology at University in Budapest and served as a Member of Parliament in the Hungarian Parliament between 1993 and 2002. I really look forward to hearing more about politics in Hungary and a bit about his story. So, welcome to People and Politics. Peter Hack, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, David, for having me.
It's such a pleasure. You're my first you're my first guest from overseas. I've had politicians and academics from the UK so far, so not from Europeans. So it's very nice of you to spend time, and I'm very grateful. And so first of all, I think I read that you're professor of law in Budapest, but you spent time in the Hungarian Parliament between 1990 and 2002, and I just wonder if you'd like to talk about your work.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I understand that the majority of you viewers are from Scotland, and I have to tell you that I really love Scotland. My first visit from the Eastern Bloc to the West was to Edinburgh in 1987. It was a long time ago, but I still love Edinburgh, and I hope that someday I will be able to go back and visit the city again. So I'm a lawyer, as you mentioned, and I've learned here. I got my degree here in Budapest, Hungary, in the early 1980s. And right after finishing the law faculty, I was invited to stay in the university as a lecturer. And at that time, Hungary was still under the Soviet occupation. Soviet military was present here in Budapest and all over Hungary. And it was the communist regime, and telling the truth that at that time, very few people believed that this Soviet system will end soon. So I was very happy to be invited into the university, because at that time the Hungarian universities were much freer than the other Eastern European universities. In East Germany, in Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, it was a requirement from university scholars to be members of the communist parties, not in Hungary. Oh. So in Hungary, I was not a member of the Communist Party. I never was a member of the party. And the university created a fairly free atmosphere. So it was possible to make some research. I especially dealt with criminal procedure law, because I think that the criminal cases were the ones when the state and the individual clashed in the most dramatic ways. The state, through a criminal procedure, can deprive somebody from their life. At that time, there was death penalty in Hungary. The state can deprive somebody from their freedom, some from their dignity, and so on and so forth, or property. So I was interested on that field, that what kind of chance an individual has to fight against the state in such a dramatic situation. So this was my research topic. I made interviews with prisoners, how they went through the procedure, what was their perspective. And suddenly in the late 80s, the political transition started in Hungary. New movements, NGOs was formed, because at that time forming a political party was illegal. It was a crime to establish a political party. According to the Hungarian Communist Criminal Code, any kind of organization out of the context of the communist network was illegal. So I at that time, I saw that in my generation, I was born in 1959, 3 years after the anti-communist revolution here in Hungary in 1956. That was the most dramatic anti-communist revolution within the Eastern Bloc within that 40 years. And it was my parents' generation, and I know that people someday will ask me, as I asked my father, what did you do in a specific time? I asked my father, what did you do in 56? And in 1988, 89, I was thinking about one day somebody will ask me, what did I do when there was a possibility to fight against the communist oppression? So I joined this democratic movement, the Alliance of Free Democrats. I became an expert for them. They have very few experts on criminal procedure law and police law. So I was a valuable asset for them as an expert, and took part on the negotiation process in the summer of 1989, which was organized between the Communist Party and the opposition. I led one of the group of the negotiators. So we aimed to eliminate those elements of the criminal code which penalized the political opposition. So we said that first step we have to abolish death penalty for political crimes. Then we have to abolish criminalizing political opinions in throughout the communist regime. Any kind of political opinion which was not in harmony with the communist ideas could be punished, and people could be sent to prison for their opinion. So that was part of the negotiation. Throughout the negotiation in the summer of 1989, the opposition was able to reach far-reaching changes in the legal system of Hungary. We amended the constitution we achieved to amend the constitution very broadly. We adopted a new party law, which makes it possible to organize political parties. We adopted a new election law, which makes it possible to have free elections. So throughout the negotiation, I took part as an expert. Then my friends asked me whether I would like to run for office. Right. And I said, okay, I will run, and it happened. So in 1990, I got into the parliament for the first freely elected parliament in Hungary. I was the justice spokesperson of my party, which was at that time the largest opposition party. In 94, 4 years later, my party became member of the governing coalition. So my party was behind the government, and I became the chairman of the Constitutional and Judicial Committee in the parliament. Although I was just 34 years old, and I think I was one of the youngest chairperson for such a committee, which is the most influential committee of the parliament. Wow. Then in 98, I ran again and became member for the third consecutive term for 4 more years. At that time in the opposition again. So throughout the 12 years, I spent 4 + 4 years in opposition and 4 years in government. And I learned a lot throughout these 12 years. But in 2010, 2002, I decided not to run again and went back to the university. And since that, I am active in the university, and I'm a full-time professor of criminal procedure law in the Budapest University.
That's a really fascinating story. It's really amazing. I do want to go back a little bit to something you said there about the country in the 80s. You said that Hungary was a little bit freer than other Eastern European people. Why was that? Why was Hungary a bit different to the other European countries?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Even at that time in the English literature, they often mentioned Hungary as the happiest barrack in the lager. So, and the reason for why did it happen? I think it goes back to the revolution in 1956. So it was a very bloody revolution in 1956. The Hungarian freedom fighters fought against the Russian occupation of the country. It was just a little bit less than 2 weeks, so from 23rd of October until 4th of November, the revolution lived, but a lot of young people sacrificed their life for the freedom. And the new communist government, which was formed with the Soviet help in Hungary, was really afraid of repeating such a revolution. So that's why, especially from the end of the 1960s, definitely they started it in 1968, they tried to implement economical and political reforms. We don't have to think about far-reaching reforms. The economical reforms made it possible for citizens to have their very small private businesses. Those of you viewers who visited Eastern Europe before 1990 could realize that in Eastern Germany or in Czechoslovakia or even in Poland, there were very, very few, or in some country, absolutely zero private companies. But in Hungary, in the late 60s, 70s, farmers could have very small agricultural fields where they can produce vegetables and fruits, and they could sell it in the market. In the companies, blue-collar workers could organize small communities where they can work overtime and make profit for themselves. Cabs, taxis, cab. I don't know what term you use. The cab drivers has got permission to have their own cars and make some profit from themselves. So they were not forced to be members of state-owned companies, and so on and so forth. So that's why people could make a little bit more money than in other countries. Especially Romania was extremely poor in the 80s. Poland was very, very dire situation in the 1980s. And Czechoslovakia again was very, very poor. But in Hungary, people could afford a little bit more. Plus, there was a limited possibility to travel to the West. As I mentioned earlier, I visited Scotland in 1987. It was still under the communists. I took part in a summer school, a summer university course organized by an American university, and they held it in Edinburgh. And it was a possibility for a Hungarian young scholar to spend a month in a Western country, which was impossible, for example, for East Germans or for Czechoslovakians. So the fear from a new revolution led the Hungarian communist elite to be more flexible than the hardliners from the other countries.
Wow, that's very fascinating. It's good. So when you're in Parliament, you were serving while it was the first premiership of Viktor Orban. And what was that like? What was some of the main things of that time?
Actually, I know Viktor Orban very well because he had graduated in the same university where I
Yeah,
graduated, and he finishes a couple of years after me, and I met him as a young, I was a young professor and he was a student, and his friends who formed the Fidesz. And we were together in the opposition between 1990 and 94. And then I was in the government side. He was in the opposition. Then in 98, as you correctly mentioned, he became the prime minister. It was his first term. So if we go back to the 1990s, uh, this situation from a legal point of view or a political point of view was very unique. Still today, I have a class in my university which with the title of Transitional Justice, which deals with the unique legal situation when a new democracy have to address the wrongdoings of the previous regime. And we had to transform the whole legal system within a short time. One of my friend at that time used the picture saying that it was a task like you have to repair a bus, changing the tires, changing the wheels, changing the motor, the brakes, the windows, everything, while the bus is running with 60 miles on the highway. Yeah. So it was impossible to close the country for reconstruction, saying that sorry, we closed the country for a year, we have to reconstruct everything. And what we have to reconstruct, we have to do something with the political crimes which were committed by the communists. We had to do something with the economy because very few Western Europeans realized that the communism was not just human rights abuses. The communist, like for example, the South American dictatorships, which committed very horrible crimes against the people, torture people, kill people, and so on and so forth. But the South American or the South European dictatorships like Spain under Franco, or Portugal under Salazar, or Greece under the military dictatorships, they deprived people from their human rights, but they never confiscated the property practically of the whole country. So I always try to explain to my foreign students that try to imagine that your house with what was built by your grandparents were confiscated and you were forced to leave the house. The agriculture fields were confiscated and the peasants were forced to work in cooperatives without property rights. So the farmers had to work on their fields, but they were not able to sell what they produced, and they were not able to sell the field itself. So practically all of their rights, which were always their rights, were deprived, and they lost the control over the property which was produced by generations of the fathers and grandfathers and great and grandfathers. People were anybody who had a company, the company was confiscated. In the first step, all the companies which has more than 100 employees, then more than 50, then more than 10, then every company was confiscated. So and these properties were held by the government for 40 years. Wow. How can you give it back to the former owners? Or is it a better idea to give it to those who are working there instead of giving back to the former owners. So all of these issues were very, very complicated and very unpopular. The state-owned economy was extremely inefficient, and the budget deficit was skyrocketed. The inflation was in the skies. In the late 1980s, it was over 35% inflation rate. So I still remember when I married in '89 and we had to buy our first very small apartment, we had to borrow money from the bank for 68% interest rate. So nowadays it's very difficult. I couldn't imagine how.
I can't imagine that. Yeah,
That's right.
Well,
That's right. So it was a very, very difficult situation, and that's the idea was to privatize as much thing as possible. From retrospectively speaking, I would say that it was a mistake by the governments at that time to sell everything for cash. I mean, for money and not for investment.
And feeling that Viktor Orban has come under quite a lot of criticism for the people that say that there's an element of Hungary that the democratic process is slipping a bit backwards, and he comes under quite a lot of criticism for being right wing, and particularly his views on LGBT. And I wonder how you felt about that, and whether you thought it was a backward step or a forward step.
Well, and I mentioned that I personally know Viktor Orban, but we are not close friends. So in private life, we haven't met in the last 30 years. When we were together in the politics, we took part together in political events, but not in personal. And we were always in different parties. So I was never member. Well, actually, I was very short time. I was member of his party when they formed, and there was a criminal procedure against them. The prosecutor general started a criminal procedure, and my former students asked me to write to sign a petition for them. And then it turned out that I was still within the age limit when the Fidesz party, Orban's party, formed itself. They had an age limit of 35 years for the membership. So just people under 35 years of old could join the party, because they wanted to keep this party for their original name was Young Democrats. So Federation of Young Democrats. And it's turned out that I was at that time still under 35, so I could join the party, and it was an important gesture that the university professors are joining the party. Why the criminal procedure started against the leaders. So I was very shortly the member of the party, but I was never in the same political organization in the rest of the last 34 years. So when I will say some good things about Orban, it's not because I am his political colleague. In a lot of field, I'm quite critical with his government and the decisions of his government. But I think we have to admit that he is a political genius. So he is a person who is in the top of politics since 1988, I would say. So it's quite a long time. He's the longest serving prime minister right now in Europe. And I think that He won the elections, the last four elections together. He won it not because of cheating, but because he understood much better the Hungarian voters than the rest of the political fields. So, there is, you can often read the criticism that the election system is favorable for Orban's, which is in some respect it's true, but all the polls, even the opposition polls, shows that still today his party has between 47 to 52% of the support of the electorate. So, which is quite a significant support. And I think that, um, you know, I have a very, very clear memory when I was in Edinburgh, and with some American university students, we traveled to Glasgow and visited the National Museum in Glasgow. And I still remember very clearly that I stepped into a large room, and in the opposite wall, I saw a huge picture, which I first saw that it is a Hungarian picture about the romantic time of Hungary. And the title of the picture was something like members of I can't remember the name of the clan, the survivors of the clan, or something like that. It was very, very, very tragic, and that's I think that in this respect, Hungary throughout the history always suffered from the oppression of its neighbors.
Right.
Sometimes from the east, sometimes from the west, sometimes from the south. 500 years ago, the Turks occupied Hungary.
Right.
Then the Austrians occupied Hungary. Then the Germans occupied for a short time. Then the Russians for 40 years, for 50 years. So the Hungarians always lived in the last 500 years, almost 500 years, from 1526 until 1990, almost more than 90% of the time, Hungary was occupied by someone. So the independence for Hungarians is a very, very important issue. And I think that Orban understood it much better than the rest of the political field. And he started a political movement strengthening I would say the nationalist feelings in Hungary. It's not against others, but it's that we have the right. We survived 1,000 years in this field. We survived the Turks. We survived the Austrians. We survived the Russians. We have a nation which should be proud of its achievements, and we don't want to be loyal servants of the Western elite, which is very often seeking its own economical interest.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of Scottish people could understand that. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I'm sure, because the independence movement here, which seems to be growing in some ways, and
Yeah.
but I'm sure it's a similar. This is another thing. And when you talk about occupation, there's a lot of people in Scotland who think that we are occupied by Britain or England, or that's not necessarily what I think. But I'm just saying that there's a lot of people who do that. I noticed that you are the leader of a faith community in Hungary, I think called PEC, is that correct? And I wonder if that
Yes.
was a part in your politics, your thinking. I found that really interesting.
Well, I think that well, on my decision to join politics was very much partly because of my faith. Under the communist regime, the religion was uh, in a certain period it was prohibited. People were persecuted because of their faith, and uh, then people were tolerated, but it was impossible to reach within a certain level in the society. So you can be judge or prosecutor if you are uh, strongly religious. And I was 28 years old when I met with Christians, and I joined to a church. At that time, it was an illegal church, and partly my decision was led by the fact that I understood that what does it mean that people are persecuted because of their faith, and I believe that for my kids and for my grandkids, I would like to have a country where it is free, it is possible to practice your religion, and 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 I think still that one of the most important cement of the community is the family and the faith. So the faith-based communities could be the strongest pillar of countries, and I would say that without my faith, I wouldn't survive in politics or in life at all.
Yeah, I completely agree that I feel it. I feel like family and faith is the pillar of or certainly one of the pillars of the community, but I think sadly it's being forced to the periphery. Yeah. I feel like we could talk for so long. I got so much to talk to you about. It's really, really interesting. But I feel conscious of time but I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you again. And if you ever
Me too.
if you ever do come to Edinburgh, I'd love to meet you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Hope we will find personally as well. And
yeah,
the same is true for you if you are visiting Budapest. Please let me know.
yeah,
So thank you for having me.
it's a pleasure, Notos. Thank you very much for your time. I'm very
Thank
grateful.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.